We just had something go right over the top of us. I hate to say this looked like a long cylindrical object. It almost looked like a cruise missile type of thing moving really fast and went right over the top.
What do you think about all this stuff about, the New York Times had articles about it. There's Air Force test pilots have come out talking about encountering flying saucers or unidentified flying objects, particularly Commander Fravor, who had that
David
tic-tac
Fravor
thing. Yeah. What do you think about all that?
Echo 6-1 Tango Project. Roger. There's troubleshooting machines like
But after talking to some of these folks, including Fravor and a handful of others who were both pilots and also were involved in the ATIP program for the U.S. government, for the military, there's things out there that we haven't been able to identify, right? And I'm not jumping on the alien train, right, necessarily. But what I'm saying is that there are things that extremely experienced pilots, military pilots with significant amounts of experience couldn't figure out, couldn't identify.
I want to first thank you for the invitation to speak to the committee on the UAP topic that's been in the news for the past 6 years and seems to be continuing to gain momentum. As you know, my name is David Fravor. I'm a retired commander in the United States Navy. In 2004, I was a commanding officer of Strike Fighter Squadron 41, the world-famous Black Aces. We were attached to Carrier Wing 11, stationed on board the USS Nimitz, and had begun a 2-month workup cycle off the coast of California. On this day, we were scheduled for a 2v2 air-to-air training with the USS Princeton as our control. When we launched off Nimitz, my wingman was joining up. We were told that the training was going to be suspended and we were going to proceed with real-world tasking. As we proceeded to the west, the air controller was counting down the range to an object that we were going to, and we were unaware of what we were going to see when we arrived. The controller had told us that these objects had been observed for over 2 weeks, coming down from over 80,000 feet, rapidly descending to 20,000 feet, hanging out for hours, and then going straight back up. For those who don't realize, above 80,000 feet is space. We arrived at the location at approximately 20,000 feet, and the controller called merge plot, which means that our radar blip was now in the same resolution cell as the contact. As we looked around, we noticed that we saw some whitewater off our right side. It's important to note that the weather on this day was as close to perfect as you could ask for off the coast of San Diego. Clear skies, light winds, calm seas, no whitecaps from waves, so the whitewater stood out in a large blue ocean. All 4 of us, because we were in F-18Fs, so we had pilots and Wizzo in the back seat, looked down and saw a white tic-tac object with a longitudinal axis pointing north-south and moving very abruptly over the water like a ping-pong ball. There were no rotors, no rotor wash, or any sign of visible control surfaces like wings. As we started clockwise towards the object, my Wizzo and I decided to go down and take a closer look with the other aircraft staying in high cover to observe both us and the tic-tac. We proceeded around the circle about 90 degrees from the start of our descent, and the object suddenly shifted its longitudinal axis, aligned it with my aircraft, and began to climb. We continued down another 270 degrees, nose low, where the tic-tac, or we considered 270 degrees to where, and we went nose low to where the tic-tac would have been. Our altitude at this point was about 15,000 feet, and the tic-tac was about 12,000. As we pulled nose onto the object, within about a half mile of it, it rapidly accelerated in front of us and disappeared. Our wingman, roughly 8,000 feet above us, lost contact also. We immediately turned back to see where the whitewater was at, and it was gone also. So as we started to turn back towards the east, the controller came up and said, "Sir, you're not going to believe this, but that thing is at your cap point, roughly 60 miles away in less than a minute."
Right. And so I'm certainly not going to be smart enough to say, okay, this is what it was. Was it a foreign government's experimental aircraft? Was it something? I don't know. But what I do know is that the U.S. government took it seriously enough that they developed their own internal program within the Pentagon to try to sort out the wheat from the chaff, right? And say, okay, what do we actually have to worry about? In part because it's a national security issue, right? If there is a aircraft, or if there's something up there that a military pilot sees, for instance, that they can't identify, all right, well, we have an obligation to figure out what that is, because if it's a hostile foreign government's efforts to develop, craft that we don't know about, or propulsion systems we don't know about, then yes, we should be working on that issue. The problem has always been that once you talk about that, then people immediately go, "Oh, aliens, huh? Area 51," and it kind of gets dismissed.
Yeah.
But there was a much more serious effort than I knew about before I started working on this thing. And so I don't know. I think, I've got an open mind about that. It's like that old, thing about how can we really be the only people out here, right? Or life forms out here. I don't know. That seems a little obscure for me to believe.
It seems unrealistic.
Yeah. So, but
a guy like Fravor, that's the thing. When someone who's that rock solid comes out and tells the story, and he's not deviating from his story. He's not a guy who's trying to make money. He's just, and he doesn't have a history of telling fantastic stories.
And he knew what it meant when he was going to come forward and talk about this. And you've got the gun cameras, and you've got the radar operators who also saw the same thing.
They saw it, and they said it was actively jamming their radar.
Yeah.
I started out extremely skeptical about this whole thing. I thought this was just rubbish from the tabloids, but I was surprised to find thousands of U.S. government documents from intelligence agencies that tended to indicate that there was a little bit more to this than met the eye. So I went to seek guidance from the various highest levels of the United States intelligence community, and I was quite alarmed at what I was able to learn.
Do you anticipate that any of the recovered vehicles would ever become available for technological research outside of the military circles?
Again, I honestly don't know. 10 years ago, the answer would have been no.
Yeah.
Whether as time has evolved, they're beginning to become more open on it. There's a possibility.
Seems like if we had to admit it was real, if it was something that was real and we were being contacted on a regular basis, or at least a semi-regular basis, that would change the way everybody feels about everything.
Yes.
Remember when Reagan gave that speech?
Mm-hmm. Perhaps we need some outside universal threat to make us recognize this common bound. I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world. And yet, I ask you, is not an alien force already among us?
Yeah, I mean, look, Area 51. Area 51 was scouted out for use as an experimental, test site for aircraft, and made perfect sense. Well, then you get all these experimental aircraft being developed out there and flown, some successfully, some not, and locals, see this shit. Locals being a fairly good-sized region because of the distance on these, and it's understandable how you start getting some of these stories. But, having said that, I sat down with Fravor, right? We talked about this a lot for this one episode, and I talked to several others. And, again, I come away and I'm not sure what to think, but again, I'm not closing the book on anything at this point.
They got a skiff for David Grush to be able to go into, or the documents that he has, the reports that he has, go into and inform people like Representative Burchett and others who have the authority. So finally they got that skiff. Do you remember that? It was so weird. You and I have been in skiffs. That's no problem for us. Why wouldn't they let a decorated intelligence officer tell Congress for oversight what they need to know? Well, luckily we're there, and we saw a post by Representative Luna that they got the skiff, and I confirmed that with Representative Burchett. So they're going to be able to hear what David Grush couldn't say in the congressional hearing.
Mr. Chairman, ranking members and congressmen, thank you. I'm happy to be here. This is an important issue, and I'm grateful for your time. My name is David Charles Grush. I was an intelligence officer for 14 years, both in the U.S. Air Force, both active duty, Air National Guard, and Reserve, at the rank of major, and most recently from 2021 to 2023, at the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, NGA, at the GS-15 civilian level, which is the military equivalent of a full bird colonel. I was my agency's co-lead in unidentified anomalous phenomena and transmedium object analysis, as well as reporting to the UAP task force, UAPTF, and eventually, once it was established, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, AARO. I became a whistleblower through a PPD-19 urgent concern filing in May 2022 with the Intelligence Community Inspector General. following concerning reports from multiple esteemed and credentialed current and former military and intelligence community individuals that the U.S. government is operating with secrecy above congressional oversight with regards to UAPs. My testimony is based on information I've been given by individuals with a long-standing track record of legitimacy and service to this country, many of whom also have shared compelling evidence in the form of photography, official documentation, and classified oral testimony to myself and my various colleagues. I have taken every step I can to corroborate this evidence over a period of 4 years while I was with the UAP Task Force and do my due diligence on the individual sharing it. This is because of these steps, I believe strongly in the importance of bringing this information before you. I am driven by a commitment of both to truth and transparency, rooted in our inherent duty to uphold the United States Constitution and protect the American people. I'm asking Congress to hold our government to this standard and thoroughly investigate these claims. But as I stand here under oath now, I am speaking to the facts as I've been told them. In the U.S. Air Force, in my National Reconnaissance Office, NRO, reservist capacity, I was a member of the UAP Task Force from 2019 to 2021. I served at the NRO Operations Center on the Director's Briefing Staff, which included the coordination of the Presidential Daily Brief and supporting variety of contingency operations, which I was the Reserve Intelligence Division Chief backup. In 2019, the UAP Task Force Director asked me to identify all special access programs and controlled access programs, also known as SAPs and CAPs, we needed to satisfy our congressionally mandated mission, and we were direct report at the time to the DepSecDef. At the time, due to my extensive executive level intelligence support duties, I was cleared to literally all relevant compartments and in a position of extreme trust, both in my military and civilian capacities. I was informed in the course of my official duties of a multi-decade UAP crash retrieval and reverse engineering program, to which I was denied access to those additional read-ons when I requested it. I made the decision, based on the data I collected, to report this information to my superiors and multiple inspectors general, and in effect becoming a whistleblower. As you know, I've suffered retaliation for my decision, but I am hopeful that my actions will ultimately lead to a positive outcome of increased transparency. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer your questions.
Because the technology, if you could figure out how to reverse engineer it, how it works, it'd be an incredible boon to our defense establishment, to the Pentagon, DOD, intelligence agencies, everybody. I mean, the weapons potential alone would be tremendous. We're worried that our adversaries are doing the same thing, that Russia and China and maybe some other countries are investigating this and trying to get a leap forward in technology as an advantage over us. So national security is baked into this, which is one reason that James Lukatsky has been reluctant to spill all the beans that he might know. He worries that appearing before Congress, even behind closed doors, would lead to leaks, and it would be the equivalent of telling Congress would almost be like telling Red China in some words that I have heard. So, I know people are mad at him because he didn't tell everything he knew at once. But of course, in UFO world, people are always mad about something. But he told us what he could, what he was authorized to say, and didn't want to go beyond it. But he's hoping to push the topic forward in coming months and years. So I know people are mad at James Lukatsky right now, but I think he went as far as he can. And as he has told us, there are national security implications baked into this topic, and that will apply to Tim Burchett and Luna and other members of Congress who want to push the ball forward.
He was working for the US Navy, but in his spare time he's checking many Australian reports of UFOs and comparing them with American reports. His aim is to see if the reports tally, in short, whether UFOs constitute a global phenomenon. In Melbourne, he's talking with Brian King.
Professor MacDonald, what have you found here that's been of use to you?
I've investigated about 50 or 60 cases since I came down to New Zealand and Australia. Extremely interesting UFO sightings, essentially similar to those in the United States.
What are the main similarities?
persons of really quite high credibility reporting unconventional objects, discs, cigar-shaped objects, frequently at very low elevation, hovering over sometimes urban areas, sometimes over cars, following cars.
What really strikes me is that 55 years on, these people are very certain about what they saw. And it just begs belief to me that in Australia, we've never had any official investigation. And flatly, I think there's been a cover-up. I really do. I think somebody has buried the Department of Supply report, which I know exists.
We returned to Nimitz. We were taking off our gear. We were talking to one of my crews that was getting ready to launch. We mentioned it to them, and they went out and luckily got the video that you see, that 90-second video. What you don't see is the radar tape that was never released, and we don't know where it's at, of the active jamming that the object put on an APG-73 radar, and I can get into modes later if you're interested. What is shocking to us is that the incident was never investigated. None of my crew were ever questioned. Tapes were never taken, and after a couple days, it turned into a great story with friends. It wasn't until 2009 till Jay Stratton had contacted me to investigate. Unbeknownst to all, he was part of the ATIP program in the Pentagon led by Lou Elizondo. And there was an official report that came out that's now on the internet. Years later, I was contacted by the other pilot, Alex Dietrich, and asked if I'd been contacted, and I said no, but I'm willing to talk. I was contacted by Mr. Elizondo, and we talked for a short period of time, and he said we'd be in contact. A few weeks after that, I was made aware that Lou had left the Pentagon in protest and joined forces with Tom DeLonge, Chris Mellon, Steve Justice, and others to form Two Stars Academy, an organization that pressed the issue with leading industry experts and U.S. government officials. They worked with Leslie Keane, who is present today, Ralph Blumenthal, and Helene Cooper to publish the articles in the New York Times 2017 New York Times, and it removed the stigma on the topic of UFOs, which is why we're here today. Those articles open the door for the government and public that cannot be closed. It has led to an interest from our elected officials who are not focused on little green men, but figuring out where these craft are, where they're from, the technology they possess, how do they operate. It also led to the Whistleblower Protection Act and the NDAA. There are multiple witnesses coming forward to say that have firsthand knowledge, and Mr. Grush just covered that. What concerns me is that there's no oversight from our elected officials on anything associated with our government processing or working on craft. Believe not from this world. This issue is not a full public disclosure that could undermine national security, but it is about ensuring that our system of checks and balances works across all work done in the government using taxpayer funds. Relative to government programs, even unacknowledged WAVE programs have some level of oversight by the appropriate committee members in the House and Senate, and this work that is said to be occurring from whistleblower testimonies should not be exempt. In closing, I would like to say that the Tic Tac object we engaged in 2004 was far superior to anything that we had on time, have today, or are looking to develop in the next 10 years. If we in fact have programs that possess this technology, it needs to have oversight from those people that the citizens of this great country elected in office to represent what is best for the United States and best for the citizens. I thank you for your time. Thank you very much.